Antarctica looks empty, but beneath its ice lies an entire hidden world of mountains, rivers, valleys, and strange formations no human has ever seen directly. Some satellite images appear to show pyramid-like structures. Ancient maps seem to reveal a southern land long before its official discovery, and beneath kilometers of ice, radar has detected shapes that continue to raise uncomfortable questions. No ancient city has been officially confirmed, but what if the evidence is still buried? What if Antarctica once held something that could completely rewrite human history? Stay until the end, because the final possibility may change the way you see civilization forever. Subscribe to Ancient Code Chamber and comment "Before the Ice" if you believe history is hiding something beneath Antarctica. Chapter 1. The continent that was never meant to be understood. When most people hear the name Antarctica, they imagine nothing more than endless white ice stretching beyond the horizon, violent snowstorms, freezing temperatures, and a place so hostile that almost no one can survive there for long. It feels like a continent that has always been frozen, always been empty, and always been beyond the reach of human history. But that image is only the surface. The truth is far more astonishing. Antarctica is not simply a giant sheet of ice. It is an entire hidden continent, and almost everything we know about it comes from looking through kilometers of frozen cover that has concealed its true landscape for countless ages. Beneath this immense blanket of ice lies a forgotten world unlike anything most people have ever imagined. There are enormous mountain ranges taller than many peaks visible elsewhere on Earth. There are deep valleys carved by ancient rivers, vast plains, hidden volcanic regions, and hundreds of lakes trapped beneath the ice in complete darkness. Some of these lakes have remained isolated from the outside world for hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of years, making Antarctica one of the last truly unexplored frontiers on our planet. It is not an empty land at all. It is simply a land we have never truly seen. Modern technology has slowly begun revealing what has remained hidden for so long. Satellites orbiting high above the Earth measure tiny changes in gravity. Aircraft equipped with powerful radar systems send signals through kilometers of ice to map the landscape below. Seismic instruments listen to the echoes traveling through buried rock, while scientists combine thousands of measurements to build images of a continent that no human eyes have ever witnessed directly. Every new survey uncovers another piece of a puzzle that seems to grow more mysterious rather than less. As researchers mapped the buried terrain, they discovered something remarkable. Antarctica is far from flat. Massive mountain chains stretch across the continent beneath the ice. Ancient river valleys cut through the bedrock, proving that flowing water once shaped this land. Gigantic canyons disappear beneath glaciers, while underground lakes connect through hidden waterways that continue to move beneath the frozen surface even today. The deeper scientists looked, the more they realized that Antarctica has a complex geological history, one far older and more dynamic than anyone had imagined only a few decades ago. These discoveries naturally gave rise to an extraordinary question. If Antarctica once had rivers, valleys, lakes, and forests, could it also have been visited by ancient people long before the continent became the frozen wilderness we know today? At first glance, the idea sounds impossible. After all, Antarctica is one of the coldest places on Earth, yet the continent has not always looked this way. Long before modern humans existed, geological evidence shows that Antarctica experienced much warmer climates. Fossils of ancient trees, pollen, leaves, and even dinosaurs have been discovered there, proving beyond doubt that this continent once supported thriving ecosystems completely unlike the frozen desert of today. This fact alone has inspired countless theories. Some suggest that if Antarctica once supported forests and rivers, perhaps it also supported early human settlements during a later warm period. Others believe ancient navigators may have reached parts of its coastline when sea conditions were different, leaving behind traces now buried beneath moving glaciers. These ideas remain speculative, and there is currently no verified archaeological evidence proving that humans ever established settlements in Antarctica's distant past. However, history has repeatedly shown that what seems impossible today often becomes tomorrow's accepted discovery. Entire civilizations have emerged from deserts once believed empty. Great cities have been uncovered beneath dense jungles where no one expected them to exist. Ancient temples have appeared beneath lakes, while forgotten settlements have been found beneath the sea after thousands of years hidden beneath rising oceans. The greatest challenge with Antarctica is that almost none of its ancient ground is accessible. On every other continent, archaeologists can walk across exposed landscapes, excavate ruins, and carefully uncover evidence layer by layer. In Antarctica, nearly the entire surface is locked beneath ice that in some places reaches several kilometers in thickness. If there are ancient structures hidden below, they cannot simply be uncovered with a shovel or brush. They would remain sealed beneath one of the largest natural vaults on Earth, protected by ice that has preserved its secrets through ages of climate change, volcanic eruptions, shifting continents, and the rise and fall of every known civilization. Adding to the mystery are the unusual shapes occasionally revealed through satellite imagery and radar surveys. Some formations appear surprisingly geometric, others seem almost too symmetrical to be ordinary mountains. While geologists explain that nature is fully capable of creating strikingly regular shapes through erosion, glaciation, and tectonic forces, these images continue to capture the imagination of millions. They remind us that the human mind naturally searches for patterns and hidden meaning, especially when looking at places almost no one has ever explored. What makes Antarctica different from every other mystery on Earth is not simply the possibility that something extraordinary could be hidden there. It is the fact that we currently lack the ability to investigate most of it directly. More than 98% of the continent remains buried beneath ice. Every discovery depends on advanced technology, careful interpretation, and years of scientific research. Even then, the hidden landscape reveals only fragments of its story, leaving countless questions unanswered. Perhaps there are no forgotten temples beneath the ice. Perhaps there are no ancient cities waiting to be rediscovered. But history teaches us to be careful whenever we declare that every mystery has already been solved. There was a time when Troy was dismissed as nothing more than legend. There was a time when Göbekli Tepe had not yet been uncovered, and scholars believed monumental architecture began thousands of years later than it actually did. There was a time when entire civilizations lay buried beneath jungles, deserts, and oceans, completely unknown to the modern world until one remarkable discovery changed everything. That is why Antarctica continues to fascinate historians, explorers, scientists, and dreamers alike. It is not because we have found proof of a forgotten civilization beneath its ice. It is because Antarctica remains one of the very few places on Earth where such proof, if it exists at all, could still be waiting. Hidden beneath kilometers of frozen silence lies a continent whose deepest secrets have never been seen by human eyes. And until those secrets are finally uncovered, Antarctica will remain one of the last great mysteries of our planet, a place where every new discovery has the potential to force humanity to ask an uncomfortable question. What if the greatest chapter of human history is still buried beneath the ice? Chapter 2, Antarctica Before the Ice. A forgotten world lost to time. To understand why Antarctica has become one of the greatest mysteries in human history, we must first forget everything we think we know about the frozen continent. Today it is a place of endless white horizons, temperatures that can freeze exposed skin within minutes, and storms powerful enough to trap experienced explorers for weeks. It feels eternal, as though it has always been locked beneath ice. But geology tells a very different story. Antarctica was not born frozen. Long before humans walked the Earth, before the rise of the pyramids, before the first cities appeared in Mesopotamia, and even before the earliest civilizations could dream of writing their history onto stone, Antarctica was a living continent. Millions of years ago, this land looked nothing like the silent wilderness we know today. Vast forests stretched across its landscape, towering trees covered its valleys, rivers carved their way through fertile ground, and countless species of plants and animals thrived where today there is only ice. Fossilized tree trunks have been discovered preserved beneath Antarctic rock. Ancient pollen has been found locked inside sediments. Leaves from prehistoric forests have survived for millions of years, telling scientists that Antarctica once experienced seasons, rainfall, and climates capable of supporting rich ecosystems. Even dinosaur fossils have been unearthed, proving beyond any doubt that life once flourished on a continent that now appears completely lifeless. These discoveries transformed the scientific understanding of Antarctica forever. They proved that the frozen world visible today is only the latest chapter in a history that stretches back hundreds of millions of years. The continent itself remembers a time before ice. Every layer of rock beneath the glaciers contains clues about changing climates, shifting continents, and dramatic environmental transformations that shaped the Earth long before humanity appeared. The reason for this astonishing change lies deep within the planet itself. Antarctica was once part of an enormous supercontinent known as Gondwana. Alongside what are now South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Madagascar, Antarctica formed a connected landmass where plants and animals moved freely across regions that are now separated by vast oceans. Over unimaginable periods of time, the Earth's tectonic plates slowly drifted apart. Antarctica gradually migrated toward the South Pole, while ocean currents began circling the continent, isolating it from warmer waters. As millions of years passed, temperatures continued to fall. Snow that once melted each summer slowly remained year after year. Layer upon layer accumulated until enormous glaciers formed, eventually burying almost the entire continent beneath an ice sheet several kilometers thick. This explanation is supported by overwhelming geological evidence and remains the accepted scientific understanding of Antarctica's history. Yet for many researchers interested in forgotten civilizations, the story raises an intriguing question rather than ending the mystery. If Antarctica changed so dramatically over time, could parts of its coastline have remained accessible far longer than people realize? Could there have been periods when sections of the continent were less hostile than they are today, allowing ancient explorers to reach its shores? It is important to separate possibility from proof. Mainstream science does not support the idea that a highly advanced human civilization lived across Antarctica before it froze. The evidence simply does not exist. However, history repeatedly teaches us that human beings have traveled far greater distances than earlier generations of scholars believed possible. For decades, experts underestimated the abilities of ancient sailors. They assumed prehistoric people lacked the knowledge to cross open oceans, navigate by the stars, or survive long sea voyages. Yet discovery after discovery has forced historians to revise those assumptions. The first people reached Australia tens of thousands of years ago, crossing stretches of open water with technologies we still do not fully understand. Polynesian navigators sailed across thousands of kilometers of the Pacific Ocean using only stars, ocean currents, wind patterns, and their extraordinary understanding of nature. Ancient traders crossed the Indian Ocean centuries before the invention of modern navigation. Viking explorers reached North America long before Columbus. Every generation seems to uncover another example proving that ancient people were far more capable than previous historians imagined. If human beings repeatedly achieved voyages once considered impossible, should every journey toward the southern oceans automatically be dismissed? The answer is more complicated than either believers or skeptics often admit. Reaching Antarctica would have been incredibly dangerous even during warmer climatic periods. Fierce storms, freezing seas, drifting ice, and unpredictable weather would have challenged even experienced sailors. Yet difficult is not the same as impossible. Human curiosity has always driven explorers toward the unknown, often with astonishing success. This possibility becomes even more interesting when we remember that the end of the last ice age dramatically changed coastlines across the entire world. Around 12,000 years ago, glaciers melted on a massive scale, causing sea levels to rise by more than 100 meters. Entire landscapes disappeared beneath the ocean. Valleys became bays. Coastal settlements vanished beneath rising waters. Places where ancient people once hunted, fished, traded, and built their homes now lie hidden beneath the sea, waiting for underwater archaeologists to discover them. Evidence for these submerged landscapes already exists across multiple continents. Ancient forests have been found beneath the North Sea. Submerged settlements have been identified along the Mediterranean coast. Archaeologists continue discovering evidence of prehistoric communities now lying beneath modern oceans because the people of the past naturally preferred living near rivers, lakes, and coastlines. As sea levels rose, those locations were slowly swallowed by water. This raises a fascinating possibility. If early humans explored regions farther south than we currently know, any temporary camps, coastal shelters, or navigation sites they established could have disappeared beneath changing coastlines or advancing glaciers thousands of years ago. Such sites would be extraordinarily difficult to detect today, hidden beneath both rising seas and moving ice. Another reason Antarctica continues to capture the imagination is that ice itself can become an incredible preserver of history. In dry deserts, organic material slowly decays. In tropical jungles, plants quickly reclaim abandoned structures. But extreme cold can preserve objects for astonishing lengths of time. Frozen mammoths have survived with soft tissue still intact after tens of thousands of years. Ancient human remains discovered in glaciers have retained clothing, skin, and even stomach contents. Ice has an extraordinary ability to protect the past. Imagine, for just a moment, what that means if ancient human artifacts were ever buried beneath Antarctic ice. Stone tools, carved wood, woven fibers, bones, or even traces of ancient campsites could theoretically remain preserved far better than similar objects exposed elsewhere on Earth. They would not necessarily survive forever, but under the right conditions, the ice itself could become one of history's greatest protective vaults. This possibility explains why Antarctica attracts not only scientists, but also historians, explorers, and independent researchers searching for clues to humanity's forgotten past. Every expedition reveals another hidden valley, another buried mountain range, another ancient river channel, or another geological surprise concealed beneath kilometers of frozen silence. The continent seems determined to remind us that we still know remarkably little about what lies beneath its surface. Of course, speculation alone cannot replace evidence. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and so far no verified archaeological discovery has demonstrated that ancient humans built settlements beneath Antarctica's ice. That fact must always remain at the center of any serious discussion. Yet genuine scientific curiosity does not end where certainty begins. Instead, it asks careful questions, tests new ideas, and follows evidence wherever it leads. Perhaps Antarctica never hosted an unknown civilization. Perhaps its greatest secrets are geological rather than archaeological. But there is another mystery that continues to challenge historians even today, one that cannot simply be explained by changing climates or drifting continents. Centuries before Antarctica was officially discovered, several ancient maps appeared to depict a mysterious southern land with details that many believe should have been impossible to know. Whether these maps preserve forgotten knowledge, remarkable coincidence, or something even stranger remains one of history's most controversial debates. To understand why these mysterious charts continue to divide scholars around the world, we must now examine the maps that many believe should never have existed. Chapter 3. The Ancient Maps that should never have known Antarctica. If Antarctica truly remained unknown until the modern age, then one question refuses to disappear. Why do several centuries-old maps appear to show a mysterious southern land long before explorers officially reached the frozen continent? This question has fascinated historians, cartographers, archaeologists, and mystery researchers for generations because maps are unlike myths or legends. A legend may change each time it is retold, but a map is created with a purpose. It is meant to guide, record, and preserve geographical knowledge. Even when ancient map makers made mistakes, those mistakes often reveal where they believed their information had come from. That is why a handful of old maps continue to spark one of history's most controversial debates. The most famous of these is the Piri-Reis map, created in the year 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri-Reis. Only part of the original map survives today, yet even this fragment has become one of the most discussed historical documents in the world. It accurately depicts portions of Europe, North Africa, and the eastern coastline of South America with remarkable precision for its time. More importantly, Piri-Reis himself wrote notes explaining that his work was not created entirely from his own observations. Instead, he claimed to have compiled information from many older maps collected from different civilizations, including Portuguese charts, Arab sources, and much earlier documents that have since disappeared from history. This single statement changed everything. If Piri-Reis truly copied older maps, then where did those older maps come from? Who created them? How old were they? And what knowledge might have been preserved through generations of copying before finally reaching his hands? Historians generally agree that medieval and Renaissance cartographers often relied upon earlier sources. Maps were copied, improved, and combined over centuries. Information passed from sailor to sailor, from empire to empire, sometimes surviving long after the original documents had been destroyed. This means the Piri-Reis map is not simply a 16th century creation. It may contain fragments of geographical traditions far older than the man whose name appears upon it. The greatest controversy centers on the southern portion of the map. Some researchers argue that this landmass resembles the coastline of Antarctica hidden beneath modern ice. According to this interpretation, the map appears to show mountain ranges and coastal outlines that would supposedly only become visible if the massive ice sheet covering Antarctica were removed. If this extraordinary claim were true, it would imply that someone mapped Antarctica before it became completely covered in ice, or at the very least possessed geographical knowledge impossible for the early 16th century. It is a breathtaking idea, one capable of rewriting human history overnight. But there is a problem. Most professional historians and cartographic experts strongly disagree with this interpretation. They argue that the southern land shown on the Piri-Reis map is almost certainly not Antarctica at all. Instead, they believe it represents a distorted continuation of South America's coastline, stretched and incorrectly connected because early explorers lacked complete information about the southern Atlantic. Such distortions were common on maps of that era. Coastlines often bent unnaturally, islands appeared in impossible locations, and continents were joined together simply because no one yet knew what separated them. To many experts, the mystery disappears once these historical mapping techniques are understood. Yet the debate refuses to die because the Piri-Reis map is not the only strange chart connected to Antarctica. Another remarkable document appeared in the 16th century, created by the French mathematician and cartographer Aaron Sphene. His world map displayed an enormous southern continent that looked surprisingly detailed compared to many maps of its time. Rivers seemed to flow across the land. Mountain ranges appeared to divide different regions. The shape of the continent itself reminded many later researchers of Antarctica. Once again, mystery writers suggested that ancient geographical knowledge had somehow survived into the Renaissance. Mainstream historians offer a different explanation. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, many scholars believed the Earth required a large southern continent simply to balance the land masses of the northern hemisphere. This hypothetical continent became known as Terra Australis Incognita, meaning the unknown southern land. It was not necessarily based on exploration. Instead, it represented a philosophical assumption that symmetry must exist across the globe. Many cartographers therefore drew an enormous southern continent even though no one had actually mapped it. This explanation is logical, but it still leaves fascinating questions. Why did different mapmakers repeatedly imagine a great southern land? Were they simply following tradition, or had fragments of genuine exploration gradually blended with speculation over centuries? History shows that ancient maps often mixed accurate observations with educated guesses. A single chart might include correctly drawn coastlines beside mythical islands inhabited by sea monsters. Reality and imagination frequently existed together on the same parchment. The mystery deepens further with the 18th century work of Philippe Bouacha, a respected French geographer. Bouacha proposed that Antarctica might actually consist of separate landmasses divided by a great inland sea hidden beneath the ice. At first glance, this seemed like pure speculation. Yet centuries later, modern geological surveys revealed that much of Antarctica's bedrock does indeed lie below sea level, and if the ice disappeared, portions of the continent would form large islands separated by water. To believers, this appeared almost miraculous. How could Bouacha have imagined something later shown to resemble aspects of Antarctica's hidden landscape? Again, historians urge caution. Bouacha openly described many of his ideas as geographical hypotheses rather than confirmed observations. He was attempting to explain natural phenomena using the scientific knowledge available during his own time. His conclusions happen to resemble certain geological realities, but resemblance alone does not prove access to ancient secret maps. Even so, the coincidence remains remarkable enough to keep the discussion alive. The deeper researchers investigate these maps, the more they realize that ancient cartography is extraordinarily complicated. A coastline may have been copied from an older chart, rotated incorrectly, combined with rumors from sailors, and then altered again by later mapmakers trying to fill empty spaces. By the time the final version reaches us centuries later, separating accurate observation from artistic imagination becomes almost impossible. There is another fascinating detail often overlooked in these debates. Ancient civilizations depended heavily upon navigation. Long before satellites or GPS, sailors crossed vast oceans using stars, wind patterns, currents, and careful observation of the natural world. Every successful voyage expanded geographical knowledge. Every expedition added another fragment to humanity's understanding of the Earth. It is entirely possible that information gathered by forgotten sailors survived indirectly through generations of copied maps, even after the original voyages themselves vanished from written history. Knowledge has a strange way of surviving. A library may burn, yet a single copy of one manuscript escapes. A civilization may collapse, yet one traveler preserves part of its knowledge. An empire may disappear, yet its maps are inherited by those who never knew who first created them. History is filled with examples of information traveling farther than the people who originally discovered it. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we remember how much knowledge has already been lost. The Library of Alexandria, perhaps the greatest center of learning in the ancient world, was gradually destroyed over centuries. Countless manuscripts vanished forever. Entire collections of maps, astronomical observations, engineering works, and historical records disappeared with them. Across the world, wars, fires, floods, invasions, and simple neglect erased enormous portions of humanity's intellectual heritage. We know far less about the ancient world than the ancient world knew about itself. That fact alone should make us humble whenever we speak about what ancient people supposedly could or could not accomplish. Still, honesty demands an important reminder. None of these maps provides accepted proof that Antarctica was known in prehistoric times. The similarities remain debated. Interpretations vary widely. Many apparent matches disappear when measurements are carefully compared using modern cartographic methods. Extraordinary conclusions cannot rest upon visual resemblance alone. Yet perhaps the greatest value of these mysterious maps is not that they prove an ancient civilization existed beneath Antarctica. Their greatest value is that they remind us how incomplete our historical record truly is. They force us to ask difficult questions about lost knowledge, forgotten explorers, vanished libraries, and the fragile journey by which information survives across centuries. But ancient maps are only drawings made by human hands. What if modern technology could reveal something far more convincing? Over the past few decades, satellites orbiting thousands of kilometers above the Earth have captured strange formations across Antarctica. High-resolution radar has penetrated deep beneath the ice, and hidden among mountains, valleys, and glaciers, several unusual shapes have appeared. Shapes that some believe resemble enormous pyramids rising from one of the most isolated places on our planet. Whether these formations are masterpieces of nature or the first visible signs of something buried beneath the ice is the mystery we will explore next. Chapter 4. The Pyramid Shapes Beneath the Ice. Nature's Illusion, or humanity's greatest secret. By the beginning of the 21st century, the mystery surrounding Antarctica had entered an entirely new era. For centuries, explorers could only describe what they saw with their own eyes. Vast sections of the continent remained unreachable, hidden behind towering walls of ice, violent storms, and temperatures that made long expeditions almost impossible. But satellites changed everything. Suddenly, humanity could observe Antarctica from space. High above the Earth, powerful imaging systems photographed every mountain, glacier, valley, and coastline. Radar instruments penetrated through ice, while advanced computers transformed millions of measurements into detailed maps of a continent that had remained hidden for countless ages. The expectation was simple. Technology would finally eliminate the myths. Every mystery would receive a scientific explanation. Every unknown feature would be carefully catalogued, measured, and understood. Instead, something unexpected happened. As more satellite imagery became available to researchers and eventually to the public, strange photographs began circulating across the internet. Some images appeared to show enormous triangular mountains rising sharply above the Antarctic ice. Their sides looked astonishingly straight. Their peaks appeared almost perfectly symmetrical. From certain viewing angles, these formations looked remarkably similar to the pyramids of Egypt, Mesoamerica, or Nubia. Within weeks, these photographs spread across websites, documentaries, online forums, and social media around the world. Millions of people asked the same question: how could nature create something that looked so perfectly designed? For many, the answer seemed obvious. These were not mountains at all. They were gigantic pyramids buried beneath Antarctica's ice, left behind by a forgotten civilization whose existence had been erased from history. The claim was extraordinary. If true, it would mean that beneath one of the coldest places on Earth stood monuments comparable in size to humanity's greatest architectural achievements. Such structures would require advanced planning, engineering, transportation of enormous stone blocks, and a society capable of organizing thousands of workers. They would instantly become the most important archaeological discovery in history. Yet extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. When geologists examined the same formations, they offered a very different explanation. The mountains visible in these satellite images belong to regions where rocky peaks emerge above the surrounding glaciers. These exposed summits are known as nunataks. Unlike the flat ice surrounding them, nunataks remain visible because they rise high enough to break through the frozen surface. Over millions of years, glaciers flowing from multiple directions slowly grind against these mountains, carving away their sides with astonishing precision. This process naturally creates steep faces that meet near the summit, forming what geologists call pyramidal peaks. Far from being unique to Antarctica, similar mountains exist throughout the world. One of the most famous examples is the Matterhorn in the Alps, whose nearly perfect pyramid shape has inspired artists, climbers, and photographers for generations. Other pyramidal peaks appear in the Himalayas, the Andes, the Rocky Mountains, and numerous glaciated landscapes where erosion has sculpted mountains from several directions at once. Nature, given enough time, is capable of producing geometry that appears almost impossible. Hexagonal basalt columns in Northern Ireland, look as though they were carved by master stonemasons, yet they formed naturally as volcanic lava cooled and cracked into nearly perfect shapes. The Giant's Causeway appears designed, so does Devil's Tower in the United States. The towering stone pillars of Zhangjiajie in China seem almost supernatural. The crystal caves of Mexico contain enormous transparent formations that resemble works of futuristic architecture. Across the world, nature repeatedly demonstrates that symmetry does not always require intelligent design. Still, many researchers interested in Antarctica argue that these explanations leave certain questions unanswered. They point out that some Antarctic formations appear unusually isolated, with multiple faces meeting at remarkably consistent angles. They ask why several pyramid-like structures appear within the same broad region. They suggest that if even one of these mountains contained artificial stonework beneath its ice-covered surface, history would change forever. The problem is that appearance alone proves nothing. Human perception evolved to recognize patterns. Our ancestors survived by identifying faces, pathways, shelters, and dangers within complex natural environments. As a result, the human brain constantly searches for familiar shapes, even when none actually exist. Psychologists call this tendency pareidolia, the natural habit of seeing meaningful patterns where only random forms exist. We see animals in clouds, faces in the moon, human figures in rock formations, ancient temples in mountain cliffs. This instinct helps us survive, but it can also mislead us. Archaeologists understand this better than anyone. Every excavation begins with careful skepticism. A straight line might be a wall, or it might be a natural fracture. A circular pattern could be an ancient building, or simply the result of geological processes. Every apparent discovery must survive repeated testing before it earns acceptance. If Antarctica truly contained artificial pyramids, scientists would expect much more than symmetrical peaks. They would expect evidence of construction. They would search for cut stone blocks stacked in deliberate courses rather than natural rock layers. They would look for internal chambers hidden beneath the surface. They would examine the surrounding landscape for roads, retaining walls, foundations, drainage systems, or nearby settlements. Chemical analysis would reveal tool marks, transported materials, or evidence that stone had been deliberately shaped. Ground-penetrating radar would identify repeating internal geometry inconsistent with natural mountain formation. Without these signs, the safest explanation remains geology rather than archaeology. Yet, Antarctica introduces a challenge unlike anywhere else on Earth. Most of these suspected formations cannot be examined directly with ease. Many lie hundreds of kilometers from the nearest research station. Blizzards can appear without warning. Temperatures plunge far below freezing. Aircraft have limited operating windows. Ground expeditions require enormous logistical planning. Even reaching a single mountain can cost millions of dollars and involve years of preparation. Because of these difficulties, countless locations visible from satellites have never received detailed archaeological investigation. Scientists naturally prioritize research involving climate change, glaciology, geology, biology, and environmental monitoring. Searching every unusual mountain for hidden ruins simply is not practical. This gap between public curiosity and scientific investigation has allowed speculation to flourish. Every few months, new images emerge online claiming to show hidden entrances cut into mountain faces, enormous staircases disappearing beneath snow, rectangular walls stretching across valleys, or gigantic structures buried beneath glaciers. Many of these images are later explained as shadows, compressed satellite data, unusual lighting conditions, or ordinary geological formations viewed from misleading angles. Others remain unresolved, not because they are necessarily artificial, but because no detailed investigation has yet been conducted. The mystery grows even deeper when radar technology enters the discussion. Unlike ordinary photographs, radar systems can penetrate ice and provide information about the hidden landscape beneath. They reveal buried mountain ranges, ancient river valleys, underground lakes, and changes in rock density invisible from the surface. Occasionally, radar identifies unusually smooth surfaces, sharply defined boundaries, or geometric-looking reflections. To mystery researchers, these anomalies are exciting. To scientists, they are simply signals requiring interpretation. Radar cannot immediately distinguish between an underground temple and a flat layer of sediment. It cannot automatically identify a buried wall or a natural rock formation. Every signal must be compared with geological models, ice movement, mineral composition, and countless other variables before conclusions can be drawn. The public often imagines radar functioning like a giant underground camera. In reality, it behaves more like listening to echoes inside a dark cave. The echoes reveal shape and density, but interpreting them correctly requires extraordinary expertise. Still, Antarctica continues to surprise researchers. Entire mountain ranges have been discovered beneath kilometers of ice where no one expected them. Ancient river systems have appeared in radar surveys. Hidden volcanic regions have been identified beneath glaciers once believed completely stable. Each discovery reminds us that Antarctica is far more complex than anyone imagined only a generation ago. If geology can hide mountains taller than the Alps beneath ice, what else might still remain concealed? Could there be caves preserved for hundreds of thousands of years? Ancient coastlines untouched since the last great glaciation, buried forests locked beneath frozen sediments, or perhaps traces of human activity so small that current technology simply overlooks them. At present, there is no accepted evidence that any pyramid in Antarctica was built by human hands. That fact remains unchanged. Yet history repeatedly teaches us something equally important. Many of humanity's greatest discoveries began as strange anomalies that experts initially struggled to explain. The ruins of Troy were once dismissed as fiction. The monumental complex of Göbekli Tepe remained hidden beneath an ordinary hill until excavation revealed one of archaeology's greatest surprises. Entire Maya cities disappeared beneath jungle canopies until airborne laser scanning exposed vast networks of temples, roads, and settlements invisible from the ground. Again and again, the impossible has become the undeniable, not because people believed extraordinary stories, but because evidence eventually emerged. Perhaps Antarctica's pyramid-like mountains are nothing more than magnificent works of nature, or perhaps one unusual formation somewhere beneath kilometers of ancient ice is waiting for future technology to reveal something no one has dared to imagine. Because if there is one lesson Antarctica continues to teach us, it is this: the greatest mysteries are rarely hidden in plain sight. They are hidden beneath layers of time, ice, and assumptions. And sometimes, the most extraordinary secret is not the one we have already found, but the one we have not yet learned how to see. In the next chapter, we will journey even deeper beneath the Antarctic ice, where modern radar has uncovered buried lakes, forgotten mountain ranges, mysterious underground landscapes, and strange signals that continue to challenge everything we thought we knew about the frozen continent. Chapter 5. The world beneath the ice, hidden lakes, buried mountains, and signals from the deep. The mystery of Antarctica does not truly begin on its surface. It begins far below it, in a world no human being has ever walked through, a world sealed beneath kilometers of ancient ice where mountains rise in darkness, rivers move without sunlight, lakes remain isolated for unimaginable periods of time, and strange radar signals appear from places too deep and too dangerous to examine directly. If the frozen surface of Antarctica is a locked door, then the buried continent beneath it is the chamber no one has yet fully opened. For most of human history, people believed Antarctica was little more than a frozen wasteland. Even after explorers reached its shores, the continent remained largely unknown. The ice seemed permanent, solid, and lifeless. There appeared to be nothing beneath it except rock, but as scientific technology advanced, that simple picture collapsed. Researchers discovered that the ice sheet rests upon an astonishingly complex landscape, one filled with hidden valleys, buried mountain ranges, deep basins, ancient drainage systems, volcanic regions, and hundreds of bodies of liquid water. This hidden world is not motionless. Water flows beneath the ice. Lakes slowly fill and drain. Glaciers slide across buried terrain. Heat rises from the earth. Rock fractures under enormous pressure. Entire systems move in complete darkness beneath one of the coldest places on the planet. The most famous of these hidden bodies of water is Lake Vostok, an enormous subglacial lake buried beneath approximately 4 kilometers of Antarctic ice. It lies near the Russian Vostok Research Station and is one of the largest known subglacial lakes on Earth. For millions of years, this body of water may have remained separated from the surface world, sealed beneath ice and protected from sunlight, wind, and direct contact with the modern atmosphere. The discovery of Lake Vostok changed everything. Before its existence was confirmed, many scientists assumed the base of the Antarctic ice sheet was completely frozen to the bedrock. The idea that a massive lake could remain liquid beneath such extreme cold seemed almost impossible. Yet pressure from the ice above, combined with heat rising from the earth below, allows the water to remain unfrozen. This single discovery forced researchers to imagine an entire hidden hydrological system beneath Antarctica. Soon, more lakes were found, then more. Today, hundreds of subglacial lakes are believed to exist beneath the continent. Some remain isolated, while others may be linked through hidden channels. Satellite observations have shown that certain lakes gain and lose water over time, proving that liquid moves beneath the ice sheet in ways scientists are still trying to understand. The significance of these lakes reaches far beyond geology. Because they have been cut off from the surface for immense periods, they may preserve forms of microbial life that evolved in isolation. Organisms surviving there would exist without sunlight, relying on chemical energy, minerals, heat, or other unknown processes. Their discovery could expand our understanding of where life is capable of existing, both on Earth and elsewhere in the universe. If life can survive beneath kilometers of Antarctic ice, scientists argue, then similar environments may exist beneath the frozen surfaces of distant moons such as Europa or Enceladus. But for those interested in Antarctica's forgotten past, these buried lakes raise another possibility. Water preserves landscapes, but it also destroys them. A settlement built near an ancient lake could be buried in sediment. A structure could collapse beneath ice pressure. Stone blocks could be transported by moving water. Organic material could be preserved in cold, oxygen-poor environments. Any trace of ancient human presence would be transformed by the hidden forces operating beneath the ice. This means that if ruins exist below Antarctica, they may not appear as perfect temples waiting untouched in darkness. They could be shattered, tilted, buried in mud, or scattered across the bedrock. A wall might survive only as a straight line of stone. A chamber might be filled with sediment. A road could appear as a narrow ridge beneath the ice. Finding such remains would require technology capable of distinguishing archaeology from geology at extraordinary depth. That is far more difficult than most people imagine. When researchers use ice-penetrating radar, they are not looking through the ice as though it were transparent glass. Radar systems send waves downward and measure the echoes that return. Different materials reflect signals in different ways. Ice, liquid water, rock, sediment, and air produce different patterns. Scientists then convert these reflections into images and models. But these images are not photographs. They are interpretations. A bright line may indicate water. A smooth reflection may reveal flat sediment. A sudden change could represent a rock boundary. A dark zone might be caused by signal absorption rather than an empty chamber. The data must be studied carefully, compared with surrounding geology, and tested using different instruments. This is where the mystery becomes dangerous. To an untrained eye, a radar image may appear to show walls, corridors, tunnels, or rectangular chambers, but the same pattern may have a completely natural explanation. Rock layers can fracture along straight lines, sediments can create broad, flat surfaces, ancient lava flows can produce repeating geometry. Ice movement can distort signals into shapes that look artificial, yet science cannot simply dismiss every anomaly. Sometimes, Unusual patterns reveal something genuinely unexpected. That is how buried lakes were discovered. That is how hidden mountain ranges were mapped. That is how unknown canyons, river channels, and volcanic zones were identified beneath the ice. Every major discovery began as data that did not fit the simplest model. One of the most extraordinary buried landscapes beneath Antarctica is the Gamburtsev subglacial mountain range. These mountains are completely hidden beneath the ice, yet they stretch across a vast region of East Antarctica. Some peaks rise thousands of meters above the surrounding bedrock. In scale, the range has been compared to some of the world's great mountain systems, yet no human being has ever stood upon these mountains. No photograph shows their bare rock. No climber has touched their peaks. They exist in complete darkness beneath the ice sheet, known only through radar, gravity measurements, and scientific reconstruction. Their discovery stunned researchers because the mountains appeared surprisingly sharp and rugged. Scientists expected ancient buried ranges to be more heavily eroded, yet the Gamburtsevs contain steep valleys and pronounced ridges. Their hidden form suggests a complex geological history involving tectonic forces, glacial preservation, and ancient landscapes protected beneath the ice. For mystery researchers, the very existence of such mountains carries a powerful message. If an entire range can remain concealed beneath Antarctica for millions of years, then smaller structures could be hidden even more easily. A buried temple would be insignificant compared to a mountain range. An ancient settlement would occupy only a tiny fraction of the continent. A city could disappear beneath the ice without producing any signal visible from space. This does not prove that ruins exist, but it reveals how easy it would be for them to remain undetected. Antarctica is vast beyond ordinary imagination. It covers an area larger than Europe. Most of its bedrock has never been seen directly. Even detailed radar surveys do not provide perfect resolution across every region. Many areas remain poorly mapped. The search for a buried civilization would therefore be like searching for one unknown building beneath an entire continent without knowing its location, size, material, or depth. The challenge becomes even greater when we consider glacial movement. Antarctic ice is not fixed in place. It flows slowly outward from the interior toward the coast. In some regions, this movement is extremely slow. In others, glaciers and ice streams move much faster. Over thousands of years, flowing ice acts like a gigantic grinding machine. It scrapes bedrock, crushes structures, transports debris, and reshapes valleys. Any ruins buried beneath moving ice could be damaged beyond recognition. Stone walls might be broken and spread across kilometers. Foundations could be scraped away. Artifacts could be carried far from their original location. Only structures located in stable regions might remain relatively intact. This creates an important distinction. If ancient people ever reached Antarctica, the best preserved evidence might not lie beneath the thickest central ice. It may exist near ancient coastlines, dry valleys, exposed mountain regions, caves, or zones where the ice has remained stable. The McMurdo Dry Valleys provide one example of how strange Antarctica can be. These valleys are among the driest places on Earth. Some areas contain almost no snow or ice because powerful winds remove moisture faster than it can accumulate. The landscape resembles another planet, with barren rock, frozen lakes, and exposed ground. Scientists study these valleys because they preserve ancient environmental conditions and contain life adapted to extreme cold and dryness. For archaeology, such regions are especially interesting. Exposed ground is easier to examine than land beneath kilometers of ice. If ancient travelers ever reached accessible Antarctic regions, dry valleys or rocky coastal zones may preserve the strongest evidence. Yet even these places are difficult to investigate thoroughly because of environmental protection, remoteness, and the enormous scale of the continent. Another source of mystery comes from Antarctica's hidden volcanic activity. The continent contains active and extinct volcanoes. Mount Erebus, one of the most famous, rises above the ice with a persistent lava lake Beneath the ice sheet, researchers have identified numerous volcanic structures and areas where geothermal heat influences glacial movement. This underground heat may create cavities, meltwater channels, and warm zones beneath the ice. Some caves formed by volcanic heat can contain temperatures far warmer than the surrounding surface. In theory, such environments could provide shelter from the extreme cold and support unusual ecosystems. Alternative researchers have asked whether ancient humans could have used volcanic caves as protected spaces. The idea is highly speculative, but it is not physically impossible for warm caves to exist beneath Antarctic ice. The real question is whether human beings ever reached them. Without artifacts, bones, charcoal, tools, or other evidence, the theory remains unsupported. Yet the possibility demonstrates how different the hidden Antarctica may be from the frozen desert visible above. Beneath the ice, there may be warmth. There may be flowing water. There may be open chambers. There may be ecosystems completely isolated from the surface. There may be places where conditions are less hostile than anyone once believed. These discoveries have fueled countless stories about secret entrances, underground bases, hidden civilizations, and ancient tunnels. Some claims suggest that governments or military organizations have already found structures beneath the ice and concealed them from the public. Such claims require strong evidence. At present, there is no credible public proof that any government has uncovered an ancient Antarctic city or hidden archaeological complex. Secrecy alone cannot be used as evidence. When proof is missing, it is easy to claim that the proof has been hidden. This creates a theory that can never be tested because every absence becomes part of the alleged cover-up. A more careful approach asks what evidence would actually be needed. For a buried structure to be accepted as artificial, researchers would need repeated geometric patterns that do not match local geology. Multiple scanning methods would need to produce the same result. Samples would need to reveal worked stone, manufactured material, or chemical traces associated with human activity. Dating would need to show that the object was ancient. Independent teams would need access to the evidence. Without this process, an anomaly remains only an anomaly. Still, some anomalies are worth investigating. Scientists have occasionally detected unusually reflective zones beneath Antarctic ice. These may be caused by liquid water, smooth sediment, or mineral-rich rock. In other regions, radar reveals long, straight features or sharp boundaries that appear visually striking. The problem is resolution. At great depth, small objects become difficult to distinguish. A wall several meters thick may not appear clearly. A buried city might blend into rough bedrock. A chamber could be mistaken for a natural cavity. Current surveys are often designed to study the ice itself, not archaeology. Researchers want to measure thickness, movement, water flow, and geological structure. They are not always searching for human-made geometry. This raises a fascinating possibility. What if archaeological evidence has already been scanned but not recognized? A dataset collected for glaciology may contain a strange pattern no one considered important. A repeated line may have been labeled as geological noise. A rectangular anomaly may exist inside thousands of kilometers of radar data. Without an archaeologist searching specifically for artificial patterns, the signal could remain unnoticed. Modern artificial intelligence may eventually change this. Machine learning systems can analyze enormous datasets faster than human researchers. They can identify repetition, symmetry, unusual angles and patterns across millions of radar images. A future system trained to distinguish natural geology from possible structures could review decades of Antarctic surveys. It might not prove the existence of ruins, but it could identify locations worthy of closer investigation. Imagine an algorithm discovering a network of parallel lines beneath the ice, a circular formation connected to straight corridors, a group of cavities arranged with mathematical precision, a concentration of reflective material inside a buried valley. Such findings would not immediately confirm an ancient city, but they would provide a target. A research team could return with better instruments. Gravity measurements could determine density. Seismic waves could reveal internal spaces. Magnetic surveys could detect metal or unusual minerals. Eventually, a borehole might be drilled. The process would be slow, expensive, and controversial. Drilling through Antarctic ice is not simple. Researchers must prevent contamination of isolated environments. Equipment must remain sterile. Fluids used in drilling can damage ecosystems. The hole may freeze closed. Pressure can crush instruments. Weather can interrupt operations for months. International agreements also protect Antarctica for peaceful scientific research. Any excavation would require careful environmental review and cooperation among multiple nations. This is another reason why mystery stories move faster than scientific investigation. A dramatic claim can spread online in hours. A serious expedition may require years, but only the second can produce reliable truth. Imagine the moment when a probe finally reaches an unknown cavity beneath the ice. The camera descends through a narrow shaft. For thousands of meters, it sees only frozen walls. Then the ice ends. The probe enters darkness. Its lights reveal floating particles. The camera slowly turns. At first, the shapes are unclear. Then a flat surface appears, a corner, a line too straight to ignore, a stone arrangement, unlike the surrounding geology. Such a discovery would instantly become one of the most important moments in human history. But the first reaction should not be celebration. It should be verification. Could the shape be natural? Could modern researchers have left it? Could the image be distorted? Could the material have moved through the ice? Only after every ordinary explanation failed would the extraordinary conclusion begin to gain strength. This is what separates mystery from knowledge. Mystery invites questions. Knowledge survives testing. Antarctica deserves both. Its hidden lakes prove that life may exist in places once considered impossible. Its buried mountains prove that entire worlds can remain concealed beneath familiar surfaces. Its volcanic zones prove that heat and movement continue beneath the frozen continent. Its radar anomalies prove that much remains unknown. Yet none of these discoveries alone confirms that a lost civilization lived there. The most honest conclusion is also the most powerful. We do not know everything beneath Antarctica. We have not mapped every meter. We have not examined every anomaly. We have not directly touched most of the continent's ancient ground. That gap in knowledge is where possibility survives. Perhaps every strange signal will eventually receive a geological explanation. Perhaps every smooth surface will be sediment. Every chamber will be volcanic. Every straight line will be natural fracture. But perhaps one signal will not fit. Perhaps one formation will resist every geological explanation. Perhaps one buried object will contain marks no glacier could create. Perhaps one sample will reveal a material shaped by human hands. If that day comes, the world beneath Antarctica will no longer be a scientific curiosity. It will become an archaeological revolution. Until then, the frozen continent continues to guard its secrets beneath pressure, darkness, water, and ice. It remains a place where mountains can hide unseen, lakes can exist without sunlight, and entire landscapes can survive beyond the reach of human memory. And if something built by an unknown people is truly buried below, Antarctica may be preserving it not as a ruin slowly disappearing, but as a message frozen in time, a message waiting for the moment when humanity finally learns where to look. In the next chapter, we will leave the radar screens and hidden lakes behind and enter the world of ancient memory, where flood legends, vanished homelands, lost civilizations, and stories from distant cultures may contain echoes of a disaster that transformed the Earth and erased an entire chapter of the human past. Chapter 6. The Lost Memory of the South. Flood Legends, Forgotten Homelands, and the Civilization that Vanished. If the ice of Antarctica truly conceals something ancient, then the first clue may not have come from satellites, radar, or modern science. It may have survived in a far more fragile form, memory. Across the world, cultures separated by oceans, mountains, deserts, and thousands of years preserved stories of lands that disappeared, kingdoms destroyed by water, sacred cities swallowed by the sea, and entire ages of humanity erased by catastrophe. These stories were passed from one generation to the next, long before history was written in books, and although many details changed over time, the central warning often remained the same. There was once another world, something terrible happened, and only a small number of people survived to remember it. To many historians, these stories are myths created to explain floods, storms, earthquakes, and the unpredictable power of nature. To others, they may preserve distorted memories of real events that occurred at the end of the last ice age when the climate changed rapidly, glaciers melted, sea levels rose, and vast coastal landscapes disappeared beneath the ocean. But to those who believe Antarctica may once have been connected to a forgotten chapter of civilization, the similarities between these stories point toward an even more dramatic possibility. Perhaps the legends do not merely describe local disasters. Perhaps they preserve fragments of a much older memory, a memory of a homeland that vanished from the known world. The most famous of these stories is the account of Atlantis described by the Greek philosopher Plato. According to his writings, Atlantis was a powerful island civilization located beyond the Pillars of Heracles, usually identified with the Strait of Gibraltar. It possessed great wealth, impressive architecture, organized military strength, and a society capable of controlling territories far beyond its own shores. Plato explained that the people of Atlantis eventually became corrupted by power and ambition, and in a single terrible period of earthquakes and floods, their island disappeared beneath the sea. For centuries, scholars debated whether Atlantis was intended as literal history, political philosophy, moral allegory, or some combination of all three. Many believe Plato created the story to warn against arrogance and imperial power. Others argue that he may have used older traditions describing a genuine catastrophe. The search for Atlantis has led researchers to islands in the Atlantic, regions of the Mediterranean, coastal Spain, North Africa, the Caribbean, and even the Americas. Almost every unusual submerged formation has at some point been connected to the lost island. Antarctica entered the Atlantis debate much later. Supporters of the Antarctic theory proposed that the frozen continent may once have existed farther north, or experienced a warmer climate within the age of human civilization. According to this idea, Antarctica could have supported a sophisticated society before a sudden geological shift moved it into the polar region, burying its cities beneath ice. Survivors may then have escaped to other continents, carrying knowledge of astronomy, architecture, mathematics, navigation, and agriculture to the ancient cultures that emerged after the catastrophe. It is a powerful story, but it faces enormous scientific problems. The geological evidence does not support the idea that Antarctica suddenly moved into its current polar position within recent human history. Continental drift occurs over vast timescales, not within the lifetime of a civilization. The ice sheet did not appear overnight after one dramatic displacement of the Earth's crust. Antarctica's transformation was part of a long geological and climatic process extending millions of years into the past. Yet rejecting the sudden shift theory does not necessarily answer every question about ancient memory. The true connection between flood legends and Antarctica may be more subtle. At the end of the last ice age, the world changed on a scale difficult for modern people to imagine. Enormous glaciers covering parts of North America and Europe began to melt. Sea levels rose dramatically, coastlines moved inland, islands disappeared, river valleys flooded, plains that had supported generations of human communities became seabeds. The change did not happen in a single night, but there were periods when water rose rapidly enough to transform landscapes within a few generations. For people living near the coast, this would have felt like the destruction of the world. The place where their grandparents had hunted might disappear beneath the sea. Sacred burial grounds could be swallowed by rising water. Villages would be abandoned. Families would migrate inland. Stories of the lost homeland would be passed to children who had never seen it. After centuries, the details would blur. But the emotional memory would remain. The waters came, the old world vanished, and the survivors carried what knowledge they could into a new age. This process may explain why flood stories appear across so many civilizations. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells of a great flood and a man warned to build a vessel to preserve life. Earlier Sumerian traditions contain similar accounts. In the Hebrew tradition, Noah survives a world-destroying flood by building an ark. In Greek mythology, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a deluge sent to destroy humanity. Indian traditions describe Manu being warned of an approaching flood and instructed to build a vessel. Indigenous peoples across the Americas, Australia, the Pacific and other regions preserve their own stories of rising waters, drowned lands and ancestral survivors. These traditions are not identical, and they should not be treated as though they all describe one event. Different societies experience different floods, storms, tsunamis, and coastal changes. Similar human experiences can produce similar stories. Yet the global distribution of flood traditions suggests that water repeatedly shaped cultural memory in powerful ways. This is where Antarctica enters the mystery once again. During lower sea levels, coastlines around the world looked very different. The southern oceans contained islands and exposed coastal regions that are now submerged or buried beneath ice. Ancient sailors may have traveled farther south than surviving records indicate. They may have encountered ice, unfamiliar stars, strange animals, volcanic islands, or distant landmasses that later entered oral tradition. Over centuries, reports of a remote southern land could have blended with stories of lost kingdoms and world-ending floods. Perhaps no great Antarctic empire existed at all. Perhaps there was only knowledge of the far south. A coastline sighted from a vessel, an island used as a temporary shelter, a place of seasonal hunting or ritual significance, a dangerous boundary beyond which sailors believed the world became frozen. Even limited contact could create legends powerful enough to survive for generations. Ancient people did not require modern instruments to become extraordinary navigators. They studied the sun, moon, stars, waves, winds, birds, clouds, and the color of the sea. Polynesian navigators crossed enormous distances without compasses by reading ocean swells and celestial patterns. Ancient Indian Ocean traders understood seasonal monsoon winds. Mediterranean sailors followed coastlines and constellations. Northern peoples navigated through freezing waters under conditions modern travelers would consider impossible. The history of exploration repeatedly reveals that human beings reached distant places earlier than once believed. The settlement of Australia required sea crossings tens of thousands of years ago. People reached remote Pacific islands using technologies that left little archaeological evidence. Norse sailors crossed the North Atlantic and established a settlement in North America centuries before Columbus. Trade connected distant cultures across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Indian Ocean long before modern maps existed. Each discovery weakens the old assumption that ancient people remained trapped within small, familiar regions. If explorers reached the Southern Ocean, their knowledge may have entered maps, myths, and traditions that later generations no longer understood. But the lost civilization theory goes much further. It proposes that the great cultures of the ancient world inherited knowledge from survivors of an earlier, more advanced society. According to this view, civilization did not develop independently in Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, China, and the Americas. Instead, teachers from a destroyed homeland traveled across the world and helped establish new centers of knowledge. Supporters point to similarities in ancient architecture, astronomy, flood legends, sacred geometry, and stories of wise beings arriving from distant lands. They ask why pyramidal structures appeared in multiple civilizations. They compare myths of civilizing gods, ancestral teachers, and survivors who brought agriculture, writing, calendars, or laws after a catastrophe. Some identify these teachers with survivors of Atlantis. Others connect them to a forgotten global civilization. A few place their homeland in Antarctica. The theory is emotionally compelling because it offers a single explanation for many mysteries. It transforms scattered similarities into fragments of one lost story. It imagines ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, and other civilizations as inheritors of knowledge preserved from an earlier age. But similarity alone is not proof of common origin. Pyramids are structurally stable shapes that naturally arise when people build tall monuments from stone. Cultures can independently observe the same stars. Floods happen in many regions. Agriculture can develop wherever people gradually learn to manage plants and animals. Human societies facing similar challenges may invent similar solutions without ever contacting one another. Archaeology also reveals long periods of local development before the rise of famous civilizations. Egyptian culture did not suddenly appear fully formed. Its writing, religious traditions, agriculture, and architecture developed through earlier communities along the Nile. Mesopotamian cities emerged from older settlements and farming cultures. Monumental construction existed in multiple regions before the first great empires. The evidence does not require a single lost master civilization, yet archaeology also does not possess a complete record. Most ancient coastal settlements are now underwater. Wood, cloth, rope, boats, and other organic materials often decay. Nomadic cultures leave fewer permanent traces than urban societies. Political collapse, war, fire, looting, erosion, and later construction can erase entire layers of the past. Even great cities can disappear so completely that later generations doubt they ever existed. The archaeological record is not a perfect archive. It is a damaged collection of surviving fragments. This became dramatically clear with the discovery of Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. The monumental site was built thousands of years before Stonehenge and the pyramids of Egypt. Its enormous carved pillars and complex symbolic imagery reveal that prehistoric communities were capable of organized construction and ritual activity much earlier than many people expected. Göbekli Tepe did not prove the existence of Atlantis or an Antarctic civilization. It did something more important. It showed that modern assumptions about early human societies could be incomplete. Before its discovery, many people imagined prehistoric hunter-gatherers as small, simple groups with little ability to organize large projects. Göbekli Tepe demonstrated that communities without known cities or metal tools could cooperate to create monumental architecture. Other discoveries have continued expanding the timeline. Ancient settlements beneath the sea reveal that coastlines once supported communities now lost to rising waters. Large ritual centers challenge old ideas about when social complexity began. Early evidence of long-distance trade shows that people exchanged materials, ideas, and technologies across surprising distances. Every discovery makes the human past more connected, creative, and complicated. This is why the idea of a forgotten southern journey cannot be dismissed merely because it sounds unlikely. The correct question is not whether ancient people were capable of extraordinary travel. We already know they were. The question is whether evidence of such travel survives. If people reached Antarctica or nearby islands, what would they leave behind? Perhaps stone tools made from material not native to the region, charcoal from controlled fire, animal bones cut with blades, fragments of rope, wood, clothing, or boats preserved in cold conditions, human remains or DNA, carved symbols on exposed rock, a temporary shelter in a protected valley, a campsite beneath sediment near an ancient coastline. The evidence might be small. There may never have been a city. A single object could be enough. Imagine researchers drilling into an ancient Antarctic sediment layer and discovering a piece of worked wood. At first, it might appear insignificant, yet microscopic examination could reveal tool marks. Carbon dating might place it thousands of years before modern exploration. Chemical analysis could identify a tree species from South America, Australia, or another distant region. One fragment could prove a voyage no historical record remembered. Or imagine a cave near an exposed mountain range containing a layer of soot. Researchers might initially assume volcanic activity, but further testing could show repeated controlled fires. Nearby, they might find a shaped stone blade or a bone carved with lines. That discovery would not prove Atlantis. It would not prove an advanced global empire, but it would rewrite the history of human exploration. It would demonstrate that ancient people reached the southern continent long before modern nations claimed its discovery. This more modest possibility may actually be more revolutionary than the fantasy of a technologically advanced lost city. A small, ancient Antarctic camp would reveal that prehistoric sailors possessed courage, knowledge, and navigational abilities far beyond what historians currently accept. It could also explain how stories of a southern land entered ancient imagination. The idea of a hidden homeland does not always require millions of inhabitants. Sometimes a place becomes sacred because only a few people reached it. A dangerous journey can become myth. A seasonal outpost can become a kingdom in memory. A mountain seen through fog can become the palace of the gods. An ice-covered coastline can become the edge of the world. After centuries of retelling, geography becomes legend. There are also cultural traditions describing sacred directions and distant ancestral lands. Some groups remember migrations from regions that no longer match their present geography. These traditions must be studied carefully and respectfully without forcing them into modern theories. A story belonging to one culture should not be removed from its context merely to support a sensational claim. This has often happened in lost civilization research. Researchers select fragments from unrelated traditions and combine them into one grand narrative. A flood story from Mesopotamia, a creator figure from Mesoamerica, a southern land in Greek geography, and an Antarctic map are treated as pieces of the same puzzle, even when no direct historical connection exists. This method can create an impressive story, but it is not reliable evidence. True investigation requires more discipline. Dates must align. Geography must make sense. Archaeological material must support contact. Languages, genetics, technologies, and trade routes must reveal real connections. Without this foundation, similarities remain intriguing but uncertain. Yet, ancient traditions should not be ignored either. Oral memory has sometimes preserved real events far longer than scholars once believed possible. Indigenous stories have contained details matching volcanic eruptions, changing coastlines, meteor impacts, and extinct animals. Communities can maintain environmental knowledge across astonishing periods when stories are deeply connected to identity, ritual, and place. This means myths may contain historical layers beneath symbolic language. A god's anger may represent an earthquake. A monster rising from the sea may preserve memory of a tsunami. A sunken kingdom may reflect a flooded coastline. A long winter may recall volcanic darkness or climate change. A journey from the south may contain the memory of migration. The challenge is decoding these layers without pretending certainty where none exists. Antarctica itself may have influenced mythology without ever supporting permanent human settlement. Sailors entering high southern latitudes would encounter an environment unlike anything familiar. The sun could remain above the horizon for extraordinary periods or disappear into long darkness. Icebergs larger than cities would drift across the ocean. The night sky would reveal unfamiliar stars. Whales, seals, penguins, and strange birds would fill the surrounding waters. To an ancient traveler, the place might seem supernatural. The border between the human world and the realm of spirits, a land outside ordinary time, a frozen kingdom of the dead, a place where the sea turned solid and mountains floated on water. Even one surviving sailor could create stories repeated for generations. Those stories might later influence maps, showing a mysterious southern continent. They might become warnings against traveling too far. They might blend with memories of storms, shipwrecks, and vanished islands. Eventually, the original voyage would disappear, but the idea of a hidden southern world would remain. This possibility connects myth to exploration without requiring an impossible civilization. But there is another, darker possibility. What if the stories of destruction preserve memories of a genuine advanced coastal culture that disappeared when sea levels rose? Not necessarily in Antarctica itself, but somewhere within the southern oceans. During the Ice Age, coastlines were dramatically different. Islands existed where only submerged plateaus remain today. Coastal plains connected regions now separated by water. Communities living near rich marine environments may have developed boats, trade networks, astronomical knowledge, and complex social traditions while leaving most of their settlements in places now beneath the sea. When the oceans rose, their world disappeared. Survivors migrated. Their knowledge spread. Their original homeland became legend. In this scenario, Antarctica may have served as a destination, landmark, sacred boundary, or source of rare materials rather than the center of civilization. The ruins people seek beneath its ice may belong not to an empire, but to an outpost of a culture whose main settlements now lie beneath the surrounding ocean. This would make archaeological discovery even more difficult. Researchers would need to investigate submerged continental shelves, ancient coastlines, and islands transformed by rising seas and glaciers. Sonar surveys might reveal terraces, walls, harbors, or foundations beneath sediment. Underwater robots could explore regions too cold and deep for divers. The search would extend far beyond the visible continent. It would include the entire lost geography of the southern world. Many modern people imagine civilization beginning with cities, writing, kings, and stone monuments. But human complexity existed before these things. Seafaring communities could possess sophisticated environmental knowledge without constructing giant temples. A culture might navigate thousands of kilometers yet leave little more than shells, tools, hearths, and oral traditions. This matters because the absence of monumental ruins does not prove the absence of remarkable people. If ancient southern explorers existed, their greatest achievement may have been knowledge rather than architecture. They may have mapped currents, recorded stars, understood seasonal ice, traveled between islands, created stories describing places later generations forgot. Their history could disappear simply because their materials did not survive. Antarctica's ice may preserve what the ocean erased elsewhere. That is why future drilling, sediment analysis, cave exploration, and coastal surveys matter so much. The search should not begin with the assumption that an advanced city exists. It should begin with smaller, testable questions. Did humans reach southern islands earlier than accepted? Do Antarctic sediments contain traces of distant plant material transported by people? Are there signs of controlled fire in ancient exposed regions? Do any artifacts exist beneath stable ice or inside protected caves? Did early navigators possess geographical knowledge that later entered historical maps? Each answer would bring us closer to the truth. There is also the question of genetic memory and migration. Human DNA has revealed journeys that written history never recorded. Ancient remains have exposed population movements across continents, islands, and mountain ranges. Future genetic evidence could reveal contact between distant southern populations or identify unexpected ancestry among ancient coastal communities. Once again, the evidence might not lead directly to Antarctica, but it could demonstrate that maritime networks extended farther south than believed. Archaeology advances through convergence. One map is not enough. One myth is not enough. One radar anomaly is not enough. But when maps, artifacts, genetics, climate records, sediment studies, and navigation evidence begin pointing in the same direction, a stronger picture emerges. At present, that complete picture does not exist. No verified evidence proves that Antarctica was home to a lost human civilization. No accepted artifact connects the continent to Atlantis. No ancient inscription names an Antarctic city. No confirmed ruin has been excavated beneath the ice. These facts must remain clear. But uncertainty is not the same as impossibility. The silence of Antarctica may reflect absence, or it may reflect preservation. We have explored only a tiny fraction of its hidden ground. Most ancient coastlines are inaccessible. Most subglacial landscapes remain known only through broad scientific data. Many caves, valleys, and rock formations have never been examined archaeologically. History cannot reveal what no one has seriously searched for. One day, the first clue may not appear as a pyramid or a vast underground city. It may be discovered in a laboratory, hidden inside a sediment core taken for climate research. A scientist may notice pollen from a plant that should not be there, charcoal in a layer with no natural fire source, or microscopic fragments of material shaped by tools. At first, the result may be dismissed as contamination. Then another sample may reveal the same evidence. A second research team may confirm it. The location may be surveyed again. A small anomaly may appear in the radar. A borehole may be drilled. A chamber may be found. That is how revolutions often begin. Not with certainty, but with one stubborn fact that refuses to fit the accepted story. The legends of lost lands survive because humanity understands that worlds can disappear. We have seen cities destroyed by volcanoes, coastlines erased by tsunamis, kingdoms buried by deserts, and settlements swallowed by rising water. We know that memory is fragile and that history is written only by those who survive long enough to record it. Antarctica represents the ultimate lost world because it is not merely ruined. It is hidden. Its mountains are buried. Its valleys are sealed. Its ancient rivers are frozen in the landscape. Its coastlines have been transformed by ice and sea. If people ever reached it, their story may be preserved beneath layers no ordinary archaeologist can touch. Perhaps the ancient flood legends have nothing to do with Antarctica. Perhaps Atlantis was only a philosophical story. Perhaps the southern continent on early maps was simply an educated guess. Perhaps the similarities between ancient cultures arose independently. Every one of these explanations may be correct. But somewhere between myth and geology, between memory and evidence, one possibility remains open. Human beings may have known the southern world far earlier than history remembers. They may have traveled there, returned from it, and transformed the experience into legend. Or they may have disappeared there completely, leaving no voice behind except a few strange maps, distant stories, and a frozen landscape still waiting to be examined. The most dangerous mistake would be to believe every legend without evidence. But the second most dangerous mistake would be to assume every legend is meaningless simply because we have not yet found its source. History is filled with stories once dismissed as fantasy that later revealed traces of reality. Troy was searched for because an ancient poem remembered a city. Submerged landscapes were investigated because traditions spoke of lost coasts. Forgotten cultures were rediscovered because local stories preserved names long after written records vanished. Myth is not proof. But sometimes, myth is a direction, and perhaps the old stories of vanished homelands are pointing humanity toward the one place on Earth where the past is not buried beneath soil or water, but locked inside a frozen continent large enough to hide an entire forgotten age. In the final chapter, we will imagine what would happen if that age were suddenly revealed, if radar detected undeniable architecture, if a probe entered a chamber beneath the ice, and if humanity finally discovered a structure so ancient that every textbook, timeline, and theory about civilization would have to be rewritten. Chapter 7. The discovery that would rewrite human history. Every mystery reaches a point where imagination must face evidence. For Antarctica, that moment has not yet arrived. No confirmed ancient city has been uncovered beneath the ice. No verified inscription has revealed the name of a forgotten southern kingdom. No artifact has forced historians to abandon the accepted timeline of civilization. Yet the continent remains one of the few places on Earth where a discovery of that magnitude could still be hidden almost completely from view. Beneath its frozen surface lies enough unexplored ground to conceal valleys, caves, settlements, and structures that may remain beyond the reach of modern archaeology for generations. The final question is therefore not simply whether ancient ruins exist beneath Antarctica. The greater question is what would happen if tomorrow, for the first time, humanity found undeniable proof. Imagine that a scientific aircraft is crossing a remote region of East Antarctica, carrying instruments designed to study the movement and thickness of the ice. The mission has nothing to do with archaeology. The researchers are mapping hidden bedrock, measuring subglacial water, and searching for geological features that may influence future sea level rise. For hours, the radar displays ordinary patterns: rough rock, layers of ancient ice, narrow channels, and deep basins. Then something appears on the screen that does not match the surrounding landscape. At first, it looks like an error. Several lines extend beneath the ice in almost perfect parallel formation. They are separated by equal distances. At their center lies a rectangular area surrounded by what appears to be a raised boundary. The formation is too large to be a modern object and too regular to dismiss immediately as random noise. The team recalibrates the equipment and flies over the same location again. The pattern appears a second time. Another aircraft is sent months later with more advanced radar. Its instruments detect the same lines, the same central formation, and several empty spaces inside the structure that may be chambers. Gravity measurements reveal unusual differences in density. Magnetic instruments detect a concentration of material that does not match the known geology of the region. Still, no one announces the discovery. Scientists understand the danger of making extraordinary claims too early. Natural formations can appear geometric. Data can be distorted. Equipment can fail. A single mistake could destroy reputations and turn serious research into public entertainment. The information is quietly shared with glaciologists, geologists, engineers, archaeologists, and specialists in remote sensing. Most begin as skeptics. They examine the radar from every angle. They compare the formation with volcanic systems, fractured bedrock, sediment layers, buried lakes, and known effects of moving ice. One by one, ordinary explanations fail to account for the entire pattern. The lines remain too consistent. The internal spaces appear too organized. The orientation of the structure seems deliberate. The researchers face an uncomfortable possibility. They may be looking at architecture. The announcement would immediately capture the attention of the entire world. News organizations would call it the greatest archaeological mystery of the modern age. Governments would demand access to the data. Universities would compete to join the investigation. Religious groups, historians, conspiracy theorists, treasure hunters, and private companies would all attempt to shape the meaning of the discovery before anyone had even touched it. The first images would spread across the internet within minutes. Some would declare that Atlantis had been found. Others would insist that the structure belonged to extraterrestrials. Many would claim that governments had known about it for decades. Fake photographs would appear showing golden temples, giant statues, underground machines, and frozen bodies. Fabricated documents would circulate alongside genuine scientific reports. Before the first expedition reached the location, millions of people would already believe they knew exactly what had been discovered. But real science would move far more slowly. The first challenge would be reaching the site. The suspected structure might lie hundreds or thousands of kilometers from the nearest research station, buried beneath several kilometers of ice. Temperatures could fall far below the limits of ordinary machinery. Winds could prevent aircraft from landing. The area might remain inaccessible for months during the Antarctic winter. Every piece of equipment would need to be transported across one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Engineers would design a drilling system capable of penetrating the ice without contaminating the environment below. The borehole would need to remain open despite immense pressure. Instruments would have to function in darkness, extreme cold, and possibly liquid water. International scientific organizations would establish strict rules for handling any samples. Archaeologists would prepare procedures for a site unlike anything previously excavated. Unlike ordinary ruins, no one could simply remove the ice and begin digging. The entire operation might depend on a narrow opening only a few centimeters wide. A camera would be lowered first. The world would watch as the probe descended through layer after layer of ancient ice. Every meter would represent a journey backward through climate history. Bubbles trapped in the frozen walls would contain air from ages before the first known city. Volcanic ash would mark eruptions forgotten by humanity. Dust from distant continents would reveal ancient winds. The camera would continue downward for hours. Then, suddenly, the ice would end. The probe would enter an open space. Its lights would illuminate darkness that may have remained untouched for thousands of years. At first, only suspended particles would be visible. The camera would rotate slowly. A rough surface would emerge from the blackness. Scientists would search for signs of natural rock, but the first clear image would reveal something else: a wall. Not a smooth cliff or random fracture, but a surface built from individual blocks. The stones would be arranged in regular rows. Their edges would meet with visible precision. Some might be cracked or displaced by pressure, yet the pattern would remain unmistakable. For the first time, human eyes would be looking at architecture beneath Antarctica. The reaction would be impossible to control, but the discovery of a wall would only begin the investigation. Scientists would need to determine whether it was ancient or modern. Antarctica has hosted research stations, expeditions, and temporary structures during the last 2 centuries. The possibility of an unknown modern installation would have to be eliminated. Materials would be analyzed, historical records would be searched. Ice layers above the structure would be dated to establish how long it had been buried. If the ice covering the site had remained undisturbed for thousands of years, the modern explanation would collapse. The next question would be whether the structure had been built by humans. Worked stone would reveal repeated cutting marks. Mortar might contain organic material. Internal geometry could show doorways, floors, corridors, drainage channels, or foundations. If metal were present, its composition would identify whether it was natural or manufactured. Any pottery, tools, carvings, or remains would provide stronger proof. The discovery of a single human artifact would transform the mystery into history. Imagine that the camera enters a passageway and reveals a carved symbol upon the wall. It may resemble nothing from any known writing system. It could consist of lines, circles, stars, animals, or geometric patterns. Linguists around the world would begin searching for connections with early scripts from Africa, South America, Australia, Asia, and the Pacific. Perhaps the symbols would resemble a known culture. That possibility would be revolutionary enough. If the carvings were related to ancient South American traditions, they might prove voyages across the Southern Ocean long before accepted navigation. If they resembled symbols from Australia or the Pacific, they could reveal an unknown migration route. If they shared features with multiple cultures, researchers would need to determine whether the similarities came from contact, common ancestry, or coincidence. But what if the script matched nothing? Human history contains languages that disappeared without descendants. Entire writing systems remain undeciphered because no bilingual text survives. A completely unknown Antarctic script could represent a population whose culture vanished so thoroughly that no trace remained elsewhere. The structure might contain objects preserved by the cold. Wooden beams could survive where they would have decayed in warmer climates. Textiles, rope, baskets, leather, food, and human remains might remain frozen. Each item would reveal details about the builder's technology and daily lives. Clothing could show how they survived. Seeds might reveal what plants they cultivated or carried. Animal bones could identify trade or migration routes. DNA could reveal where the people came from and whether any living population descended from them. The first confirmed human remains would become among the most studied individuals in history. Scientists would examine their age, diet, diseases, injuries, ancestry, and cause of death. Isotopes in their teeth could reveal where they spent childhood. Their bones might show whether they were sailors, laborers, or members of an elite group. Preserved stomach contents could reveal their final meal. Clothing and tools might identify the climate they expected to encounter. Perhaps they would not be native to Antarctica at all. They may have arrived as explorers and become trapped. They may have established a temporary scientific or religious station. They may have used the continent to observe the stars, hunt marine animals, collect rare minerals, or mark a sacred boundary. Even a small expedition would force historians to reconsider the abilities of ancient navigators. But suppose the site were not small. Suppose further radar surveys revealed roads extending from the structure, additional buildings beneath the ice, and a vast organized settlement spread across the hidden valley. Suppose the city contained temples, storage chambers, workshops, reservoirs and towers aligned with the movements of the sun or stars. Such a discovery would destroy the idea that ancient contact with Antarctica was accidental. It would prove long-term occupation. The age of the site would then become the most important number in archaeology. If the settlement dated back 1,000 years, it would rewrite the history of medieval exploration. If it dated back 3,000 years, it would transform our understanding of ancient maritime trade. If it were 6,000 or 8,000 years old, it would demonstrate complex southern navigation during a period when such voyages are not known to have occurred. But if the structure were older than 12,000 years, humanity would face a crisis in its understanding of civilization. That date would place the builders near the end of the last ice age, before the first accepted cities, before the first recognized systems of writing, and long before monumental architecture was believed to have spread across the world. Historians would ask how such a society developed. Where were its earlier settlements? What tools did it use? How did it organize labor? How did its people cross the Southern Ocean? Why did their civilization disappear? Most importantly, why had no trace of them been found elsewhere? The discovery would not automatically prove that every ancient mystery came from one lost culture. It would not prove that the people of Antarctica taught the Egyptians, built the pyramids, or inspired every flood legend. But it would demonstrate that complex societies existed in places and periods absent from the accepted historical record. The timeline would have to expand. Archaeologists would return to old collections and re-examine forgotten objects. Strange artifacts previously dismissed as contamination might gain new significance. Submerged coastlines would be surveyed more carefully. Ancient maps would be reconsidered, not as proof, but as possible fragments of lost knowledge. Oral traditions describing southern ancestors, frozen lands or vanished homelands would receive new attention. Every continent might hold clues that had been misunderstood because no one knew what to search for. A revolution in history would begin. Yet the most extraordinary scenario would involve technology. Suppose the Antarctic structure contained tools or materials more advanced than expected for its age. Not futuristic machines or impossible energy weapons, but practical innovations that appeared too early. Precise navigation instruments, complex astronomical devices, advanced metallurgy, mechanical systems, or maps of the world created before accepted global exploration. Such objects would challenge the traditional belief that knowledge developed in a simple upward line from primitive to advanced. History would appear more fragile. Civilizations could rise, achieve remarkable things, collapse, and leave almost nothing behind. Progress would no longer look permanent. A society might understand the stars, oceans, and mathematics at a high level, yet disappear before passing that knowledge forward. This would reveal a disturbing truth. Humanity may have lost more than it remembers. Perhaps some knowledge associated with later civilizations would be recognized as inheritance rather than independent invention. Perhaps myths of teachers arriving after a flood would gain historical meaning. Perhaps early maps would be shown to contain information copied from a source much older than anyone imagined. But even then, caution would remain essential. Discoveries of this scale often attract exaggerated conclusions. If the ruins contained advanced astronomy, people might immediately claim that the builders came from space. If they used unfamiliar materials, some would call them non-human. If their architecture did not resemble known cultures, others would declare that they belonged to a separate species. The evidence would need to speak before imagination took control. Human beings have always been capable of astonishing creativity. Ancient builders moved massive stones, tracked celestial cycles, crossed oceans, and adapted to environments that appear impossible. An unfamiliar technology would not automatically require extraterrestrial assistance. It might simply reveal another form of human knowledge that developed under different conditions. The discovery could also produce political conflict. Antarctica is governed through international agreements that preserve it for peaceful scientific use. But a major archaeological site would create new pressures. Nations might argue over control, access, ownership, and publication rights. Some would claim that the ruins belong to all humanity. Others might connect the site to their own ancestral cultures and demand authority over its interpretation. Private companies might seek media rights or commercial opportunities. Tourism could threaten the fragile environment. Treasure hunters might attempt illegal expeditions. Governments could restrict access in the name of protection, creating suspicion that evidence was being hidden. The ruins would become not only an archaeological discovery, but a global test of whether humanity could protect its shared past without turning it into property. There would also be ethical questions. If human remains were found, should they be removed for study or left in place? If the site contained sacred spaces, who would decide how they were treated? If DNA connected the builders to living communities, those descendants might have rights that scientists could not ignore. Archaeology has often treated the dead as objects of study rather than people who once possessed beliefs, families, and identities. Antarctica would force the world to confront those mistakes on an unprecedented scale. The location itself would make preservation extremely difficult. Opening tunnels or chambers could introduce oxygen, heat, bacteria, and moisture. Materials preserved for thousands of years might begin decaying as soon as they were exposed. A book, textile, or wooden object could survive beneath the ice for ages and then collapse within hours after entering the modern atmosphere. Researchers would need to build specialized laboratories directly at the site. Robotic systems might explore the ruins while keeping the environment sealed. Three-dimensional scans would record every surface before anything was moved. Samples would be removed only when absolutely necessary. The city would need to be treated not as a treasure chamber, but as a frozen archive. Every object would be a page. Every wall would be a sentence. Every human remain would be a voice. The greatest discovery might be a library. Imagine a chamber protected from moving ice, filled with carved tablets, wooden records, metal plates, or another medium capable of surviving the cold. Written history from before known history would suddenly exist. The texts might describe the builders' homeland, their journeys, their rulers, their beliefs, their understanding of the sky, the catastrophe that brought them south, the reason they never returned. Perhaps they knew the climate was changing. Perhaps Antarctica was not their birthplace, but their final refuge. A population escaping war, flood, disease, or environmental collapse may have traveled toward a place they believed would remain safe. At first, the hidden valley may have supported them. Geothermal heat, protected caves, coastal resources, and seasonal sunlight could have allowed survival. They may have built structures against the cold, stored food, and observed the sky for signs of change. Then the ice advanced, sea routes closed, temperatures fell, the settlement became isolated. Each generation inherited fewer resources and less hope. The final inscriptions may not describe glory at all. They may be warnings. The builders may have understood that their civilization was ending. They may have preserved their knowledge deliberately, sealing it inside chambers protected by stone and ice. They may have believed that one day another people would find it. Their final message could be simple. We existed. We crossed the oceans. We built this place. We believed our world would last. Then it disappeared. Such a message would change far more than history. It would change how humanity understands itself. Modern civilization often behaves as though it stands outside the cycles that destroyed earlier societies. We possess satellites, medicine, computers, and powerful machines, so we imagine permanence. We believe that because our cities are larger and our technology more advanced, our knowledge can never be lost. Antarctic ruins would challenge that confidence. They would prove that a civilization could become invisible. Its monuments could vanish beneath the landscape. Its language could be forgotten. Its achievements could become legends. Its descendants could lose all memory of where they came from. The frozen city would become a warning that progress does not protect a society from collapse if it fails to understand the forces changing around it. The ruins might reveal evidence of climate disaster. Sediment layers could record sudden flooding. Crushed buildings might show glacial movement. Abandoned storage rooms could indicate famine. Human remains concentrated in shelters might reveal a final attempt to survive extreme cold. The story would feel ancient, but its warning would be modern. The builders may have believed they had more time. Every civilization believes that. The discovery could also transform science beyond archaeology. Researchers would study ancient pathogens preserved in the site, requiring extreme caution. Botanists would examine extinct plants. Climatologists would compare written records with ice core data. Astronomers would analyze ancient observations of the southern sky. Engineers would study how the structures survived under immense pressure. History, geology, biology, genetics, linguistics, astronomy, and climate science would meet inside one frozen chamber. No single discipline could understand the site alone. For decades, new discoveries would continue emerging. At first, the public might focus on spectacular images: carved walls, preserved bodies, giant structures, and strange symbols. But over time, smaller details would become equally important. A child's toy would reveal family life. A repaired tool would show that resources were scarce. A bowl containing seeds would identify their final crops. A wall covered in handprints would show the presence of ordinary people behind the monumental architecture. The lost civilization would no longer be an abstract mystery. It would become human. There may have been arguments, celebrations, marriages, births, beliefs, fears, and dreams beneath the same sky we see today. Their people may have asked the same questions we ask now. Where did we come from? What lies beyond the horizon? Will anyone remember us? That final question would receive an answer thousands of years later. Yes, but only because the ice remembered when humanity did not. Of course, there is another possibility. The first undeniable structure found beneath Antarctica may not be a city at all. It could be a solitary building, an ancient observatory aligned with the southern stars, a ceremonial monument placed at the edge of the known world, a shelter created by explorers who never returned, a navigation marker indicating that ancient sailors had reached the continent, a tomb belonging to an unknown traveler. Even the smallest structure would rewrite human history because it would prove intention. Someone came there, understood the environment, carried tools, and built something designed to survive. The discovery would raise more questions than it answered. Were they alone? How did they arrive? Where was their ship? Did they return home? Did they leave descendants? Was this their destination, or only one point along a larger route? Archaeologists would search the surrounding coastlines and islands. Oceanographers would map ancient seabeds. Geneticists would compare remains with populations across the southern hemisphere. Historians would review old travel accounts, myths, and maps for forgotten references. One discovery would create 1,000 new searches. Perhaps that is what rewriting history truly means. It does not mean replacing one simple story with another. It means admitting that the past was more complicated than we believed. A confirmed Antarctic ruin would not make every conspiracy true. It would not prove every ancient legend accurate. It would not automatically reveal an advanced global empire or visitors from another world. It would prove something more valuable. Our knowledge has limits. Human history contains missing chapters. Ancient people may have traveled farther, organized earlier, and survived harsher conditions than we ever imagined. The discovery would also remind us that mystery must remain connected to evidence. For decades, people have looked at shadows, mountains, and digital images and declared that cities had already been found. Many of those claims collapsed under examination. Some were misunderstandings. Others were deliberate fabrications. If the real discovery ever comes, it will not need exaggerated photographs or secret testimony. It will survive investigation. Independent researchers will confirm it. Materials will be tested. Dates will be repeated. Data will be published. Every attempt to disprove it will make the evidence stronger. That is the difference between a viral claim and a historical revolution. A viral claim demands belief. A revolution earns it. Until such evidence appears, Antarctica must remain a mystery rather than a conclusion. Its pyramid-shaped mountains are natural unless proven otherwise. Its radar anomalies are geological until multiple forms of evidence reveal architecture. Its ancient maps are controversial documents, not final proof. Its flood legends are cultural memories, not exact geographical records. But unanswered does not mean unimportant. The greatest discoveries often begin with questions that respectable people once considered unnecessary. Why dig beneath this hill? Why scan this jungle? Why search below the sea? Why examine this ancient story? Why look under the ice? The answer is always the same. Because the world has never revealed all its secrets at once. Antarctica may hide no civilization at all. Its buried landscape may contain only mountains, lakes, sediments, fossils, and records of climate stretching back millions of years. Those discoveries would still be extraordinary. They would help humanity understand the planet, the origins of life in extreme environments, and the future of global sea levels. But somewhere beneath the ice, the possibility remains. A straight wall, a sealed chamber, a carved symbol, a tool held by a hand forgotten before history began. One object could destroy the silence. One date could change the timeline. One human face preserved beneath the ice could force the modern world to look backward and admit that the story of civilization was never as complete as we believed. Perhaps the first signal has not yet been detected. Perhaps it already exists inside old radar data, overlooked because no one expected archaeology beneath Antarctica. Perhaps the location lies beneath ice, too deep to reach with current technology. Perhaps the discovery will come decades from now when machines can move safely beneath glaciers and map every meter of hidden ground. Or perhaps the ice has protected the evidence precisely until the moment humanity becomes capable of understanding it. When that moment arrives, Antarctica will no longer be described as the continent at the end of the world. It will become the place where the beginning of our forgotten story was found. The frozen doors will open, the darkness will fill with light, and beneath a continent believed to contain nothing but silence, humanity may finally hear the voice of a civilization saying across thousands of years, "You were not the first to believe your world would last forever." Antarctica still guards its truth beneath mountains of ice, endless darkness, and a silence older than every known civilization. No confirmed ancient city has yet been found there, no forgotten king has spoken from beneath the frozen ground, and no carved doorway has been proven to belong to a lost people. But the absence of discovery is not the same as the end of the mystery, because most of the continent's hidden landscape has never been touched, walked upon, or seen directly by human eyes. Perhaps the strange formations are only mountains shaped by glaciers. Perhaps the old maps were nothing more than imperfect guesses. Perhaps every radar anomaly will eventually receive a natural explanation. But history has taught us never to become too comfortable with certainty, because entire cities have risen from beneath deserts, temples have emerged from forgotten hills, and civilizations once dismissed as impossible have returned through a single discovery. If even one human-made structure is found beneath Antarctica, the question will no longer be whether ancient people reached the frozen continent. The question will become how much of their story was lost, how far they traveled, what they knew, and why humanity forgot them completely. Maybe Antarctica hides no vast empire. Maybe it hides only a shelter, a carved symbol, a broken tool, or the remains of one ancient traveler who crossed farther south than anyone believed possible. But sometimes one object is enough to change everything. One artifact can destroy an accepted timeline. One inscription can reveal a forgotten language. One sealed chamber can return an entire civilization to history. Until that day, Antarctica remains more than a frozen wilderness. It is a locked archive, a buried world, and perhaps the final place on Earth where the oldest chapter of humanity may still be waiting beneath the ice. If this journey made you question what history may have forgotten, comment the words "The Ice Remembers." Subscribe to Ancient Code Chamber and turn on notifications, because the next secret we uncover may be older, darker, and more dangerous than anything the world is ready to accept. Until the next chamber opens, remember this: history is not only written in books, it is buried beneath deserts, drowned beneath oceans, hidden inside mountains, and frozen beneath the ends of the earth. And sometimes, the greatest truth is not lost. It is simply waiting for the ice to break.